Thank you all for joining us tonight to talk about emotional regulation. My name is Sarah Campbell. I'm the Crisis and Family Liaison for the district. And Diane, do you want to go ahead and introduce yourself?
And I am Diane Hunter. I'm one of the school psychologists in the district.
So to kick us off, we will go ahead and we will talk about some why. So why did we pick to talk about emotional regulation for one of our parent series? Well, before I start that, if anyone has questions, feel free to throw those in the chat at any time. We might answer them throughout. I'll type an answer back or we'll answer at the end. So feel free to do that whenever. But so why we're talking about this is some data we have that just talks about a few different things related to emotional regulation. So nationally, 36.5% of students claim they have been cyberbullied. 33% prior to COVID, number of Hoosiers students grades 6 to 12 reported feeling sad or hopeless for 2+ weeks in a row. So that was an Indiana specific number, which was kind of interesting. 25.9% of Hoosier high school students do not feel safe at school. The second cause of death for Indiana youth ages 15 to 24 is suicide, and then Indiana is ranked second in the nation in 2015 for number of suicide plans. So you may ask, why are these numbers important to emotional regulation? Well, being able to regulate our emotions kind of affects all of these things that kids experience. So those are just some national numbers. And some state numbers as well. Here within Center Grove, we collect some data as well on emotional regulation. So these are some questions that we ask to students K-12, or I'm sorry, K-5, and K through 2, the teacher answers, and then 3 through 5 is the students answer these questions. And so the first one was, can you recognize and manage their emotions a certain percent of the time? So you can see that 84% of the students responded that they can recognize and manage their emotion 80% of that time. And then 50% of the time was 13% of our students. And then 4% of our students said 20% or less. The reason some people are like, why 80%? Why not 100%? Because no one can manage and recognize their emotions all the time. Even myself as a professional in the field, I can't identify and recognize 100% of the time. So 80% is a great goal to shoot for. And so this was a pretty great number, but we also want to help support those other 17% too. And then 3 through 5 students, oh, I'm sorry, that one was K2. 3 through 5 was asked. It's a similar question, it's reworded. It says, I can use strategies to calm down when I'm upset. Instead of the percentage, this one was measured with almost never, once in a while, sometimes, almost always, or frequently. And you can see those percentages there. Quite a large percentage was in that yellow to red area, which is pretty concerning and definitely identifies that we're having some challenges in our 3 through 5 students. So that's some interesting data we've collected. We then go on from grade 6 to 8, and we ask them, I know how to regulate my emotions. And again, this goes away from the percentage and onto the once in a while to almost always. A good amount of them were in the green, but still pretty significantly that yellow or red area that's kind of concerning that we want to help support. And then 9 through 12, you can see the same thing. I think it's interesting as they get older, you can see there's a little less students in the green, which I think that was interesting. Their numbers from yellow to red are a little higher. So that's kind of our data we have as to why. So now I'll hand it over to Diane to talk more material.
So this is a very big topic and it can be overwhelming. And if you are a parent who is in a crisis situation with a child who is having difficulty with emotional regulation, or sometimes we ourselves find ourselves in a situation where we're having difficulty managing our emotions, it can just be very overwhelming. So learning, as we go through these slides, and you can advance to the next one, as we're learning, we start to learn to regulate our emotions at a very early age, and it covers many emotional states. We become emotionally dysregulated when those emotions become large, and a variety of emotions can become large. Sadness can become too much to manage. Anger can become too much to manage. Happiness can also become too much to manage. We see that a lot before Christmas or other big holidays when everybody is really very excited about things that are in the near future. So we begin to learn how to regulate and manage our emotions with life experiences and with the guidance of our parents and trusted adults. So teaching how to manage emotions is a process, and it depends on that developmental level. When children are very young, they can have temper tantrums, and we're quite familiar with that. And then we begin to learn how emotions feel in our body. We learn to label our emotions. We learn to identify how large the emotion is, and we learn some strategies. Labeling is a big part of learning how to manage your emotions. So sometimes they say name it to tame it in terms of regulating an emotion. So, and this happens in that developmental age when kids are learning to talk. We start to label things, that ability to label the emotions. We can use our words rather than our behavior to communicate with others and get help or to ask for what we need. So that early childhood process is very important, but we continue to learn how to manage our emotions throughout our lives. So if we go on to the next slide, we start teaching how to regulate emotions during that early childhood phase, learning routines, bedtime, meal times, bath times, how to regulate and stop doing what we wanted to be doing and doing the things that we should be doing, and it continues through play. So these are some games and play activities that you can use to teach regulation. Freeze dancing, red light, green light games. Simon Says these sound pretty old-fashioned, but they're ways to teach children to regulate their bodies in a game kind of setting. So if you go on to the next slide, another way to teach about regulating emotions is through talking about perspective. So these are day-to-day conversations that you can have with your children, either in the classroom or at home with your kids. It builds flexible thinking about others. So what other people might be thinking, what other people might like to do, what other people might be feeling. You can talk about it when you're playing games in respect to winning and losing. You can talk about it when you're playing outside and choosing games for people to play, how people are thinking about doing homework and chores, what hurts other people's feelings. So all those conversations about perspective is building that ability to think about others. So if we go on to the next slide, another way we teach regulation is by modeling it. And we call it co-regulation, and it can help students see how to become calm, students or children. And when children are out of control, it's important for the adults to stay calm and regulated, which is sometimes very hard. Sometimes you have to give yourself a little time away to get yourself under control so that you can go back to the situation and help that child co-regulate. Whatever you implement in response to a child being dysregulated, you need to do in a way that's calm and in control. And if you need to take a moment to get in that state before you help your child, then that's really important to do. And co-regulation becomes a strategy we use with children who are dysregulated or other adults. It's what we do if we're helping a friend if they're upset about something, you don't get upset too necessarily. You try to stay calm, listen to them, help them label, give them a listening ear, validate their feelings. And this is what we try to do with children too. So another thing we can do to help children learn how to regulate their emotions is talk about how the brain works. So I've included 2 books, The Fantastic Elastic Brain, which is a really nice little book to use with young kids. And then The Brain is a book that is really more geared toward older children, preteens, and teenagers. And using your hands to imagine your brain, teaching kids that the brain is there to help them regulate their emotions. So the closed fist shows an emotionally regulated brain that's responsible for making rational and wise decisions. So when you see it all closed up, that means that everything's working well. You've got some parts of the brain, the amygdala, the prefrontal cortex, and the brainstem. They're all connected and they work together to help us regulate our emotions. The wrist is the brainstem, and that part is connected to the spine and is responsible for alertness, sleep, heartbeat, and other involuntary body actions. And when the thumb is folded across your open palm, you get to see the midbrain, where all the emotions are processed. And I think that it's really interesting for kids to know that those are processed in their brain and that they can use their brain to help regulate that. It's all part of a system. It's in your limbic system where the safety radar, the amygdala resides, where we get into that fear state or our emotions get very heightened. And I think that when you teach about the brain and how it works all together, when you start talking about deep breathing and some of those strategies that help us get re-regulated, it helps it make sense to kids. It's not something that's happening to them. It's something that they can use their prefrontal cortex, their thinking part of their brain, to help build in those strategies to help them stay regulated. So if we go on to the next slide, this is some language that we use to talk about how big the emotion is. And I took this from some of the Center Grove SEL lessons, and it comes from Zones of Regulation, which is a curriculum for teaching regulation of emotions. So it's created for younger students, but the concept is the same when working with older children. And it's real important for children to learn that emotions can be, that we also view as positive, can get too big. And when we're aware of how to regulate, we can use the appropriate strategies. So in the green, you're feeling focused, ready to learn, calm, and happy. And you're able to help others, you're able to remember things, you remember to finish your work and do all the expected behaviors. And when you're in the blue zone, you're feeling a little tired, slow, or bored. It's important to know that if you're feeling that way, there are things that you can do. You can get a drink. Walking around and just being up and moving can help wake your body up and get yourself going again. And water is wonderful for the brain. Water is just the greatest thing ever. So getting a drink can always help. Being in the yellow zone, you might feel a little frustrated, a little worried. You might be feeling a little silly. You're not really in control, but you're not out of control either. And so some of the strategies that kids are learning is that they can take a little walking break. They can count to 10. They can doodle a little bit to get themselves re-regulated, or they can talk to the teacher and ask the teacher for some assistance. It's always okay to ask for help. If you're in the red, this is the area where we really need to help them re-regulate their feeling overly excited in anticipation of something that they just can't get off their mind, or they're really feeling emotionally out of control, angry, or frustrated. And I think this is where they need to know that deep breathing is part of helping the brain re-regulate, finding a safe space. Exercise, movement is always helpful. And again, talking to a teacher, naming it to tame it. helping get that adult to help you re-regulate is always important for kids. So if we go on to the next slide, these are some things that we talked about in an earlier presentation on sadness. And sadness can become too big as well. So you want to label the feeling, talk to others. Movement and doing something you like, doing something for someone else, all of those things can help cope with that feeling of sadness. And again, if the sadness is bigger than those things can help with, you may need to get some additional help for that feeling. If we go on to the next slide, coping with worry. Worry is something that can get really out of control. It's usually something about the future, something that we're worried is going to happen, and it's in the future, so it's hard to do anything about it. But these 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 grounding techniques are very good at helping connect with the present and being just grounding yourself with the present so that you can kind of distance yourself from that future worry. Acknowledging 5 things that you can see around you, acknowledging 4 things that you can touch around you, acknowledging 3 things that you can hear around you, acknowledging 2 things that you can smell around you, acknowledging 1 thing that you can taste around you. And that kind of gets you refocused on the present and help you get past that irritability or the worry. And if we go on to the next slide, you can also use some emotion-focused coping skills that focus more on the emotion of the worry. Exercise. If you're home, you can take a bath. Giving yourself a pep talk. Positive self-talk is a huge way to cope with worry and anxiety. Meditating. This doesn't have to be long and drawn out, just quiet, short periods of time to meditate and think and get calm in yourself. This is where deep breathing can also be beneficial. Problem-focused coping skills can also be helpful. This helps you prepare for that future worry, work on managing time, asking for support with that thing that's coming up, establishing healthy boundaries. If it's something that doesn't need to be brought into your present, you can establish a boundary, creating a to-do list so that you can see and itemize what should be done then, when and where. And getting support is very important, and having that person-to-person interaction. We are social people, so sharing that emotion, naming it, sharing it, getting that personal support is very important. So if we go on to the next slide, I think that a lot of times when we talk about emotional dysregulation, we talk about coping with frustration, or we think about those emotions that are related to frustration or anger. And the goal is to redirect your thoughts away from the source of frustration. Perspective taking is a very important part of that. And that can occur when you're talking to a trusted adult. Again, when you're talking to a trusted, if you're the adult, you need to listen, validate, and then when the child is regulated, you can start building that perspective for them to put that incident of frustration in a bigger perspective. Learning how to cope with frustration is another one of those lifelong things. It's a daily experience. We get frustrated with a variety of things every single day. So it is a life skill. And we model these for our children here at school and at home through our abilities to cope with frustrations that they see us encountering. When a child is frustrated and unregulated, the adult needs to stay calm. And again, I said it before, it's okay to take a brief break if you need to re-regulate yourself, and then come back and help your child cope through that feeling of frustration. So some of the strategies would be finding a safe place, doing that deep breathing. The kids in school are learning a variety of different kinds of breathing strategies. Movement breaks, movement is always great. And talking to that trusted adult. And I think you'll see that over and over again is reaching out to a person to do that co-regulation. And then coping with anger. Anger, we all get angry. Everybody gets angry. So these are 6 things to try when you're angry. Tightly hug or squeeze a pillow or toy. We don't always have a pillow or toy, but we can learn to use our words to tell how you're feeling and share that with a trusted adult. We can slowly count to 10 or sing a song in our head, or go to an area where we could sing a song. Again, that deep breathing, take a few slow, deep breaths. Again, that contact with a trusted adult. We can take a break to calm down and do something they enjoy. And sometimes we ask kids to, when they're taking a break, to calm down and do something they enjoy, and then do a check with themselves to see if they're regulated and ready to come back to a situation that was maybe frustrating or generated some anger. So if we go on to the next slide, coping with stress. We have a lot of stress in our lives. Stress is all around us. And we, as an adult, we're learning to cope with stress, and children are learning to cope with stress as well. When we become overly stressed, we can cry, we can become angry, and sometimes we need that adult, that talking to a parent, teacher, trusted adult to help us co-regulate. If we're kind of in the yellow and we know we're stressed, we can do deep breathing, we can listen to music, we can have a movement break. Probably should have take a drink of water here as well, because that's always helpful. But it's really important to learn some of those strategies to be preventative, but also know that if we're truly at a breaking point with our stress, reaching out to another person is really important. If we go on to the next slide, we want to make a distinction between the SEL, social emotional learning lessons that we have in school versus counseling. It's very different. So our social emotional lessons have parent components that's all posted on our website. And it's the instruction that we provide for all children and students here at school. It helps children learn about their emotions and practice those regulation strategies. It's proactive and preventative. Counseling comes into play when an individual person is having more difficulty than other students. So the emotional regulation issues persist even after they've had some of this whole class instruction. So the school social worker, guidance counselor, or school psychologist might provide some sessions with the student to kind of build or practice some of those skills. We have community behavioral health here in the schools to provide that service. And there are other private sources in the community to provide that counseling or therapy. So just to differentiate those 2 types of services. And then if we go on to the next slide, people have probably heard of mood disorders. And a mood disorder is when the dysregulation is so frequent or intense, it interferes with the ability to function. So this can mean that the person is getting stuck in an emotion that is too big. Temper tantrums or anger issues, or crying, being depressed, being stressed and anxious are lasting a really long time, and your child just can't move out of that stage. They may become easily frustrated or angry by very small problems. The child sees them as bigger than they really are. There may be mood swings. There may be impulsive behaviors that are difficult to manage, frequently losing their temper and losing control that may result in some breaking of things or angry outlashings at other people. Or you may see persistent irritability or anger between outbursts. And if you're seeing that over a long period of time and it's really interfering with the child's ability to function, get ready for school, comply with rules at home, do homework, day-to-day activities, it's would be time to seek some outside assistance with that level of dysregulation. So now we're going to go on to support services.
Thank you. So I just want to take a minute here to review some different supports that we have in the school, in the community, and just some random resources that I always have on hand to give out. So first, I put some books and games here that I thought were good, in addition to the wonderful ones Diane already showed. So a lot of our counselors, especially at the elementary level, have this book set that is a little spot of emotion. I think it's 7 different books. Oh, 8. Look, it says right there. 8 different books, all about a different emotion. And in the buildings, the counselors have the little stuffed animals too, so the student can play with the little stuffed animal while the book's being read to them. And it's just a really great way to explore each emotion with your kiddo. So highly recommend those. If you reach out to me via email and you want a copy of this presentation, it'll have the link in there. So you could just click to take you to Amazon. I think it's like $30 for the whole set, so not too expensive. The other thing that I have is Playworks Resource Guide. So this is a game library. They have some other things on there too, but the game library is really cool because it gives some different game ideas, kind of specifically for the classroom, but a lot of them can be adapted to at home too, so that you could use with your kiddos, specifically related to emotional regulation. So I think the red light, green light that Diane had talked about was on there, but there's some other good ones too. This last one is a YouTube video called Relax, Regulate, and Return. This is a video where she talks about, I want to say 5, Diane, am I right? 5 different apps. Have you seen this video? No.
No, I haven't.
Okay, you were nodding like I thought maybe you had. And she talks about either 3 to 5 different free apps that you can use on a phone or an iPad that can help with relaxation and regulation. One of them that I really liked, that I can't remember the name of now, but if you look up the video, she talks about it, and it's this app that kind of is full screen, and the student can touch it and it makes a different pattern that kind of follows their finger. It reminds me of those electricity balls from like when I was a kid that you touch, it kind of touches your fingers, and then it vibrates as well. So you get kind of that sensory. And so kids like that. There's another one on the same app with like blocks where the kids can move the blocks around. It vibrates the tablet as well. So you get that sensory part of it. But she talks about some other great apps as well. So highly recommend checking that out. Another resource that if you've joined any of our other parent sessions, you know that I always advocate for Therapist Aid. Therapist Aid is a completely free website. You don't even have, you can see on the main screen, it has a login sign up. You don't even have to create an account to get these resources. So some people are like, I don't want to sign up because then I'm going to get all the emails. Well, lucky for you, you don't even have to sign up. So you can just go to this website and you can use any of the tabs. All of them are there, but my favorite personally is the worksheets tab. Within this worksheets tab, you can see down there's filter by topic, and there is actually a topic for emotions that you can pick. And so this is what that screenshot here on the right is of just, and I want to say there's 3 pages of different handouts that you can download. They come in usually 3 different languages as well. that are just really great. Some of them are activities or coloring pages that you can work with your kiddos. Or if you're noticing that, like, hey, my kid really struggles to regulate when they're angry, then you can go to the anger tab and find specific worksheets in that. So highly recommend a free resource, something you can do as a family. A lot of it too, you can even use kind of at the dinner table. If you're talking about regulation when you're angry, while you're eating dinner, you could talk about, well, I got angry at this, this, and this today, and this is what triggered me, and this is how I coped with it. Or maybe next time I can try this. I think one thing that we don't do with our kiddos, and by we, I mean myself as a parent as well, is I can tell you all day long, this is what you need to do when you're angry, right? You need to use your deep breathing techniques. But sometimes we have to talk about those things when we're calm so that when we are angry, we know to use them. And so this is a really great resource to kind of help the kids practice those skills before they're in the moment. If you feel like your kiddo is in need of some more supports, we have our supports in the building, but if you would like some therapy outside to help them with some regulation, Psychology Today is a great website. If you just Google Psychology Today or just type in psychologytoday.com, it'll take you right here. You can see, you can type in, it says find a therapist. You can drop that down and also find other things like a psychiatrist, a psychologist. They have like intensive outpatient programs, all kinds of things that you could be looking for. But specifically for mood disorders, most likely you're probably looking for just a therapist. So you can type in your zip code and then it'll pop up all the therapists in your area. You can then filter out by either issues or by your insurance if you have a specific insurance, if you want a specific gender. And then you can see on the right of that screen, the first one is taking new clients, but the second one, you can see that little yellow bar that says not accepting new clients. This website is updated every 24 hours. So in the world of today, where it's really hard to find services that have quick openings, that's a really good tab to just have right there. Like, oh, it says they're taking new clients and they take my insurance. You don't have to keep calling around. Um, so that's an option. If you go on here and you're still trying to find a therapist, not sure who's a great fit, definitely reach out to your building support as well, and that's something we can help with. More closer to building supports, I wanted to go over the current supports we have here at CG district wide. So you can see we have kind of the different tiers. We have the red, yellow, and green, or what we call tier 1, tier 2, and tier 3. Your tier 3 is very few students. These are your students that need more support. So they're getting referrals to outside agencies. So maybe they're seeing a therapist outside of school, or they're seeing a therapist or a skills clinician in the school. They have a 504 plan, an FBA, a safety plan. They might be experiencing some suicidal ideation. Those kiddos that kind of just need that extra level of support. Now, these few students that are in this service, this tier, and getting this amount of support, their parents are notified and know about this and are on board, and we're working together as a team, the school and parent. Just so you know, this is never a support that's being provided without parents' knowledge. Then our tier 2, or these yellow area, the some students. This one also, you'll see the note that the guardian is notified or gives permission before these supports happen. These might include things like some small group instruction with our social worker or school counselor, one-on-one skill building, either in or outdoor, outside the classroom. They might go to what we call our SST, or our student support team, which is just kind of a team in each building. We have a district-wide one as well that provides extra support, and kind of like a staffing, talk about what we can do to help and implement some different things. And then a lot of our schools do mentor-mentee programs as well, where it could be a 5th grade student who was recommended has a mentee that's in a younger grade, so they might spend some time with them. So those are those. All students receive these. This is what we call our tier 1 education. So they learn the conditions for learning, This includes things like trauma response practices, SEL, mental health, morning meetings, prevention learning. They all have access to a school counselor or school social worker. They all receive SEL instruction. They get employability skills, health and PE class, positive behavior supports, school-wide expectations, and character education. So the idea is these tier 1 students, all students are receiving this education in the hopes that they don't move up to tier 2. Like this kind of supports their emotional regulation. But for some of those kids that's not necessarily enough, they kind of move up to that tier 2 or that yellow section. They get a little more support. And then if we continue to move up, then we get more in place with the red supports or tier 3, whichever you prefer. So this is just a list. This is more for if this is being recorded. So if you watch the recording back and you want to see who the person is to reach out in your student's building, these are our high school and middle school. So I'll just leave those up for a second so you could quickly find that. Our next one, these are our elementary building supports. You can see we have one in each building, which is awesome. You also have an SEL counselor that goes to every building as well, but they're not listed on here, but they're there. And then this one, that's all I had for resources. If you can think of another resource that you would like, feel free to email me. It's campbells2@Center Grove. Our next session is on March 3rd, and we're going to talk about screens and mental health. I think that's really great coming up on, that'll be a couple weeks before spring break, where kids might have a couple weeks off and maybe using a little too much screen time. So feel free to scan this QR code, register here. But we are done a little early, so if anyone has any questions, you can throw them in the Q&A. If you want this recording, feel free to send me an email. But I'll leave this QR code up while we wait to see if anyone has any questions.
There's a lot to talk about with social emotional regulation. So feel free that if you want more information about how to work with your child, reach out to your school's guidance counselor or social worker or school psychologist, and we will be glad to work with you on an individual basis as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Diane. I think too, a lot of times we see what works for one kid might not work for the other. And so sometimes I think as a parent that can be frustrating because it's kind of a trial and error. So
And I
definitely
think that
reach out.
that personal connection is just really important to for you as an adult as well as for the kids to get the support that we all need
Absolutely.
to help our children learn how to regulate.
Yeah, absolutely. Right. Well, I don't see any questions, so we don't have to hang on any longer, but if you guys think of a question later, feel free to send us an email or um, follow up however you would like.
Thank you, everyone.
Yes, thank you.